Alright, part 2 of the weird motorcycle camping trip on the Columbia. So we finish up our coffee and we say goodbye to these two fellows, and we leave the one-armed man with his story behind. And yes, he did tourniquet himself up and hiked his way back in for emergency assistance. Thank God he made it. And he still lives in this area. So anyway, we headed on up. We got to our campsite around, I'd say 11:30, maybe midnight at the very latest. Everybody was pretty much already tucked in, and medieval fighting in armor was going to start the following morning, so all the fighters were definitely asleep. So we get directed to our campsite. Now, as we pull in, I had noticed that there were two sets of glowing red eyes sitting in the field. And I noted where they were. And I'm kind of like, oh, well, I've heard there are a lot of Bigfoot up in that area. And, sure enough, there were a couple of us who were coming in. But they were a couple hundred yards out, so I didn't think much of it. I figured they're not going to be messing around in the camp area, because there were like 200-300 people there. So anyway, we get directed to our little A-frame. It was Girl Scout camp. And we were in one of the little group pod areas, like there were 6 or 8 of little A-frames together, and their central seating area and fire pit. Really traditional kind of Girl Scout camp stuff from the 50s. Really, actually kind of cool. And we pull in, and as we're pulling our stuff off the bike, there was a couple guys, military guys, who come to fight, freaking out over in one of the A-frame areas, and it's right next to ours. So as we're walking over with all our gear, these guys are complaining about a Bigfoot who just weed on the guy's head, and he just washing his hair, and he's all angry about it. And I'm like, when did it happen? He's like, no, just now, man. I mean, just as you were pulling up, it had happened. I'm like, oh wow, really? So just immediately. And he's like, yeah, it was just here. I'm like, okay. I'm like, oh wow. So this guy, he finally calms down, and he and his buddies, head back to bed, and we get our stuff laid down, and we head to bed. And little A-frame, your stuff's in the end, and you got a partition wall between, and we didn't have anything to hang in the front, so I left the front open. Should have brought something to hang across the front. I was about asleep. I was dozing off real good, that point where you're kind of just half aware of the world, but you don't care anymore. And then I feel it. There's something warm on my forehead, and it feels like water. And I wake up, because I'm not really asleep yet. And I look up, and there are these two juvenile freaking Bigfoot, and one of them's weeing on my head now. So I move out of the way. And he moves to wee on me some more, and he's kind of grinning. And I look up at him, and I tell him in native language, if he doesn't stop it, I'm going to find him during the daytime when he's sleeping. I'm going to do the same to him. And he kind of looks, and his buddy, slaps him. Kind of like, two teenagers. Knock it off, she's serious, man. And, he stopped. He changed direction. And I'm like, God dang it. So they walk off, and I see as they're leaving, they're walking off over to the direction where I'd seen him sitting in the field. I'm like, oh, okay, two freaking punk brat teenage freaking sabe, goofing with the people. So I'm up, I'm washing my hair. The guy that had been up, who'd had the same incident, he's like, are you serious? Did that thing just do the same thing to you? I'm like, yeah, it did. He's like, were you serious? You said something in native. My friend said, you were threatening it. I'm like, oh, your friend speaks native. He said, yeah, enough to understand you were threatening to wee on it back. What was that about? And I explained to him, and I told him where they were at. And yeah, that was about the end of that story. So there are also comical times that you'll have around these things, and they can be, oh my God, they can be so much like ruthless teenagers. It's not even funny.